I had been on the force for just over 7 years when I experienced the night that would stick with me longer than any of the routine calls I'd answered. Longer than the dozens of burglaries, fights, and accidents I had seen. It was the kind of night that started normal but slowly spiraled into a situation that felt like it could go anywhere, and the kind that taught me that danger doesn't always announce itself with sirens or shouting. Sometimes, it creeps in quietly, almost politely, before it smacks you in the chest. It started just past midnight on a Tuesday. The streets were wet from a light rain, the kind that turns asphalt into a mirror of yellow streetlights. My partner, Davis, and I had just finished a late dinner at a diner on the edge of the city. The call came in like any other routine tip. Suspicious activity reported in a vacant warehouse near the industrial district. The dispatcher's tone didn't carry urgency, so I assumed it would be another case of someone trying to make trouble for teenagers exploring an empty building. We arrived at the warehouse 10 minutes later. The building was massive, stretching back into darkness, surrounded by chain-link fencing. A single flickering light above the entrance barely cut through the shadows. The rain had soaked the concrete, and every step we took made a soft splashing sound. There were no cars parked nearby, no signs of life other than the faint hum of a distant generator. As we approached the front doors, I noticed the lock had been smashed open. The metal lay twisted on the ground. That's when my gut started to tighten. Something about the quiet of the place didn't feel right. I pulled out my flashlight and swept the beam across the warehouse floor. Piles of crates and pallets cast long shadows, and the air smelled faintly of oil and mildew. We stepped inside carefully. The place was huge, but it wasn't empty. In the far corner, barely visible, there was a figure crouched near a stack of boxes. My heart rate went up. I motioned for Davis to cover me as I moved closer. The figure didn't respond at first, just stayed low, almost frozen. When I got within 20 feet, it became clear it wasn't an intruder in the traditional sense. It was a man, thin, disheveled, his clothes soaked and sticking to his skin. But what froze me wasn't just his appearance. It was the crate in front of him. Inside the crate were dozens of knives, carefully laid out, each one clean and sharpened. And around the crate were makeshift traps. Strings tied to cans and broken glass scattered across the floor. Whoever had set this up was waiting for someone like us. I signaled to Davis, who nodded, gripping his gun tightly. We slowly advanced, our footsteps silent against the concrete. The man's eyes followed us, and that's when I noticed the subtle twitching in his hands. He wasn't just watching, he was calculating. I could feel the tension in the air, the kind of tension that makes your skin crawl, that makes your senses sharper than ever. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed from the far end of the warehouse. Davis and I spun, guns raised, only to find nothing there. I realized then that we weren't dealing with an ordinary criminal. This person had planned for intruders. Every shadow felt like it was hiding something. Every corner seemed like it could conceal a trap. I made the split-second decision to call for backup. While on the radio, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I've responded to dangerous calls before, but this was different. The warehouse wasn't just a scene, it was a setup. Whoever was in here knew exactly what they were doing. While waiting for backup, I decided we couldn't just stand there. I needed to figure out a way to secure the man without triggering whatever he had prepared. I scanned the warehouse for anything that could be used as cover or a barrier. There was a metal shelf that could shield us if we moved carefully. We crept toward it, and I could hear the faint scraping of something against concrete. Traps being repositioned. Every movement we made had to be deliberate, or it could set off something dangerous. Davis and I managed to get behind the shelf without incident. I whispered into my radio, giving the dispatcher a full update, careful not to make any sudden noises. The tension was suffocating. My eyes kept darting toward the man, and I noticed that he was no longer crouched by the crate. He was standing now, slowly circling, his movements precise, almost rehearsed. When backup finally arrived, the dynamic changed immediately. We moved in, surrounding the man. I raised my voice, announcing that we were police. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, in a sudden, fluid motion, he lunged toward a different set of crates. I reacted instinctively, aiming my taser and firing. The impact threw him back, and the sound of metal hitting concrete echoed through the warehouse. The next few minutes were a blur. Officers rushed in, securing the area, while I moved to check the traps. There were dozens of improvised devices, tripwires, glass shards, even small explosive canisters, likely homemade and highly dangerous. It became clear that this man had been preparing for months, maybe years, to defend this space from intruders. He wasn't just dangerous. He was meticulous, patient, and completely committed. Once he was cuffed and safely in the police van, I took a moment to step outside. The rain had stopped, leaving the warehouse glistening under the cold streetlights. I could still feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. My hands shook slightly as I wrote down every detail in my notebook, knowing that this report would be one of the longest I'd ever submit. In the days that followed, we learned more about him. The man had a history of violence, of obsession with booby traps and improvised weapons. The knives in that crate were just the beginning. Investigators found stockpiles of weapons, tools, and plans for defending the warehouse from anyone who entered. Had we been even a minute later, or had he acted faster, it could have been lethal. That night changed something in me. I realized that danger doesn't always look like a mugger or a street fight. Sometimes, it hides behind the quiet patience of a person who has prepared meticulously for confrontation. I learned to respect that kind of threat, to never underestimate the careful mind behind an ordinary-looking situation. Weeks later, the warehouse was cleaned out and secured, the man was in custody, and the city could sleep a little easier knowing he was behind bars. But I still drive past that district sometimes, especially on rainy nights. The memory of that warehouse, the shadows, the crates, the silent tension, is vivid in my mind. I carry it with me, a reminder that being a police officer isn't just about responding to the obvious threats. It's about anticipating the hidden ones, the ones that don't announce themselves, the ones that could end everything in an instant if you let your guard down. I still remember the feeling of that night, stepping carefully across a floor wired with danger, knowing that one wrong move could change everything. And I also remember the relief when it ended, the clear sense of accomplishment when we finally secured the situation. It was terrifying, yes, but it was also a reminder of why I chose this job. To protect, to anticipate, to confront danger before it becomes tragedy. That night, I learned that fear is real, but preparation, calm, and focus can overcome it. I had been a patrol officer for nearly 8 years, mostly handling traffic stops, noise complaints, and the occasional domestic dispute. I never thought anything I'd face on a routine night shift would feel truly dangerous, at least not in the way you see on TV or in movies. Until that night. It was a Tuesday just past midnight. The streets were unusually quiet for the city, with a cold wind cutting through the empty avenues. My partner, Daniels, and I were cruising a stretch of road on the outskirts of town where a string of break-ins had been reported over the past month. Nothing high-profile, just garages, sheds, small homes on dead-end streets. The homeowners had mostly reported missing tools, small electronics, and cash. But this night, the dispatcher flagged a report that immediately set my stomach on edge. Unit 12, the voice crackled over the radio. Possible break-in in progress at 2425 Hollow Creek Road. Caller reports a person entering the house through the back. Suspect may be armed. Proceed with caution. Daniels glanced at me, and I saw the same tension reflected in his eyes that I felt in my own chest. Hollow Creek Road was a stretch of older houses, some abandoned, some still inhabited, with barely any streetlights. The area had an eerie stillness even in daylight. At night, it felt like stepping into a different world. We turned onto the road, the patrol car's tires crunching on gravel, and I flicked on the spotlight. Everything was dark, the only illumination coming from the faint glow of the house number on the curb and a single porch light. As we approached, I could see movement near the side of the house. A shadow, crouched, shifting from one corner to another. "Stay in the car," I whispered, more to myself than to Daniels. My heart was racing, but I forced it down, knowing panicking would only make mistakes more likely. Daniels nodded, gripping his flashlight and sidearm. We pulled slowly to a stop behind a large oak tree at the edge of the yard. I radioed dispatch, giving them our location and that we had visual contact. The shadow froze, then moved again, this time toward the back door. It was deliberate, careful, like the person knew we were coming but didn't care. That's when I noticed it. A long, dark coat, a hood pulled low, and something metallic glinting in the moonlight. A gun. The weight of it hit me instantly. This wasn't just a petty thief or a burglar looking for easy cash. This was someone dangerous, someone willing to confront a police officer if they had to. I slid out of the car silently, crouching low, motioning Daniels to follow. Our boots sank into the damp grass, the cold biting through my uniform. I moved toward the side of the house, keeping my flashlight low, using the shadows as cover. Daniels flanked me, his breathing shallow but controlled. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I had to stay calm. Training kicked in, every movement deliberate. Suddenly, the shadow stopped. I froze. Then it turned toward us, stepping out from the side of the house, and I got my first good look at the person. Masked, black clothing, and holding what looked like a handgun in both hands, aimed casually. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a moment to hesitate. "Police! Drop the weapon!" I shouted, my voice firm, loud enough to echo across the yard. The figure didn't flinch. My pulse spiked. Daniels shined his flashlight directly on the suspect, and in that instant, I saw him raise the gun slightly, aiming in our direction. Time slowed. I could feel the hairs on my neck standing up. I dove behind the corner of the house, the cold metal of my sidearm pressed against my palm, my mind racing through every possible scenario. Daniels ducked beside me, whispering something urgent. I shook my head, signaling him to stay low. The suspect moved closer to the back door, almost gliding silently across the lawn. He paused at the door, then smashed it with the butt of the gun, sending it swinging open violently. I could see inside now, faint shapes moving in the dim light of a single lamp. Someone else. Another person, smaller, crouched low, and then another. A family? Or more accomplices? Couldn't tell. I radioed for backup, keeping my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. Dispatch confirmed another unit was 5 minutes out. 5 minutes felt like an eternity. I knew we couldn't wait. The suspect came out again, this time running along the side of the house. I followed, using my training to keep low and cover angles. Daniels covered the back, and I could see the dark figure climbing through a window at the rear of the house. We approached cautiously. The inside smelled of dust and faint smoke, the kind of smell old houses had when left empty too long. Broken glass crunched underfoot. That's when we heard it. Footsteps running upstairs. Not one set, multiple, heavy, fast. Adrenaline surged. I motioned Daniels up the stairs quietly, but before we could move, a door slammed at the far end of the hall, loud enough to make us both jump. Someone was inside, hiding, waiting. I moved forward slowly, every step deliberate, flashlight sweeping the walls. Shadows clung to corners. Then, a movement, a flash of black, darting down the stairs toward us. I fired a warning shot. The figure stopped. Another shot, more controlled. The person collapsed, hands flailing, and I realized it was a young man, terrified, not trying to hurt us, just desperate to escape. The rest of the night blurred into chaos. Backup arrived, sweeping the house. We found 2 more hiding in the basement, both disarmed and restrained quickly. It turned out the main suspect was part of a small gang targeting houses like this one, older homes with minimal security in quiet neighborhoods. They'd broken in that night looking for cash and valuables, not expecting anyone to be home or for the police to arrive so quickly. When it was finally over, I stepped outside into the early morning air. My uniform was smeared with dirt, sweat, and blood from the suspect's minor scrapes, my hands trembling. Daniels and I exchanged a look that said everything without words. We'd survived, yes, but the danger had been real, visceral. Real enough to make every trivial complaint or traffic stop we'd handled in the past feel distant and meaningless. I filed the report later that morning, my hands still shaking as I wrote every detail down. I made sure to include everything, the shadows, the movements, the fear, and the decisions we had to make in seconds. I stayed at the station for hours after the incident, going over the events in my mind, trying to make sense of it, trying to find any misstep we could have avoided. But there were none. We had acted according to training. We had survived because of it. By the time I got home, sunlight was breaking through the clouds. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, finally allowing myself to breathe. The fear was still there, lingering at the edges of my mind, but so was relief and a strange sense of pride. I had faced something that could have killed me and come out alive, and I knew that, despite the fear, I had done exactly what I was supposed to do. That night changed the way I looked at my job. Nothing about it was glamorous. It wasn't about sirens or dramatic chases on the freeway. It was about presence, awareness, and making life or death decisions in a heartbeat. And I would never forget the terror in those moments, the way the shadows could hide real danger, and the weight of responsibility that came with wearing the badge. By the time I finally went to sleep, exhausted, I knew that the city was still quiet, still dangerous, but I was ready. I had seen what real fear looked like, and I had survived it. And somehow, that knowledge made me feel stronger, safer, and more prepared for whatever the night might throw at me next. I had been on the night shift for nearly 10 hours when the call came in. It was a routine-sounding dispatch at first. Possible break-in at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it. Abandoned warehouses were common in that area, and most of the time, they were just teenagers trying to hang out, or homeless people looking for a place to sleep. But something about the location made my gut tighten. The place was near an old industrial park, half collapsed, with broken windows, rusted metal, and a reputation that made locals avoid it after dark. The streets leading there were barely lit, and the old security cameras had been decommissioned years ago. By the time I got there, it was nearly midnight. The radio chatter was low, and the city's usual hum had thinned to a distant echo. I parked my cruiser a block away, leaving the emergency lights off so I wouldn't alert anyone inside. The warehouse loomed in front of me, bigger than I remembered from the maps, with shadows pooling in the broken doorways. I grabbed my flashlight and my service weapon and approached cautiously, the gravel crunching under my boots. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It wasn't the usual must of an old building. This was different. Acrid, like burnt rubber mixed with oil, and something faintly metallic that made my stomach turn. I swept the flashlight over the wide, open space inside, trying to pick out shapes. Rusted machinery lay in heaps, and debris was scattered across the cracked concrete floor. Then I saw it. A trail of wet footprints leading deeper into the warehouse. The prints were dark and shiny under the flashlight, smeared in places, and unmistakably fresh. I radioed dispatch, keeping my voice low. Unit 7 on scene. Warehouse looks clear from entry. Footprints leading inside. Proceeding with caution. No response yet. I knew I was on my own for the next few minutes. The trail of footprints led to a side corridor where the darkness thickened. I could hear something, a soft, scraping sound. Not loud enough to be machinery, more like someone moving metal against metal slowly, deliberately. My pulse quickened. I had responded to plenty of burglaries, fights, and domestic incidents, but something about this felt different, dangerous in a way I couldn't shake. I edged forward, keeping my flashlight low so it wouldn't give away my exact position. The corridor opened into a larger room, one of the few sections that still had a roof. The air was colder here, and the smell stronger. My flashlight caught the outlines of stacked pallets and crates, forming a kind of maze. And then I saw it. A shadow moving at the far end of the room. Not fast, not running, just moving, sliding along the floor. I called out once, my voice steady even as my heart thudded. "Police! Show yourself!" No response. The shadow stopped. I took a step forward and then another. That's when I noticed the first sign that this wasn't just a homeless person or a kid looking for trouble. On the ground, lying among the crates, were personal items, purses, backpacks, a few phones. Some of them had blood smears. My stomach dropped. Whoever was here wasn't hiding. They were hunting, and the prints weren't just footprints. They were dragging marks, as if something heavy had been pulled across the floor. I edged closer to the far wall, where the shadow had disappeared. That's when I saw the figure. A man crouched low, moving crates as if to create a barrier or a trap. His movements were methodical, precise, almost surgical. My flashlight illuminated his profile for a split second. Thin, tall, wearing a hood and gloves that had dark stains on them. My training kicked in. This wasn't just a thief. This was someone prepared for violence. I radioed again, this time louder. Dispatch, Unit 7. Suspect in warehouse, armed and dangerous. Need backup immediately. Silence. No response. The frequency was busy, probably handling other calls. I cursed under my breath. Couldn't wait. Whoever this was wasn't going to stick around politely. I moved closer, staying low. My flashlight flicked over the ground, catching more signs. Broken locks, cut wires, and what looked like improvised restraints. Strips of cloth tied and left on the floor. Panic gnawed at the back of my mind. The situation had escalated far beyond a simple break-in. There could be hostages, and I hadn't seen any exits blocked, which meant anyone inside could be in serious danger. I decided to check the crates. I had to know. I moved carefully, hearing each step echo. And then I saw it. A person, face down, bound, bruised, but alive. Relief and dread slammed together. I was so focused on the victim that I didn't notice the man behind another stack until he lunged. I barely had time to fire a warning shot. The bullet hit the wall, scattering debris, and the man froze. He didn't run, didn't scream, just stared. That's when I realized he wasn't acting on impulse. He was calculating. Slowly, he raised something in his hands. A knife. My instincts screamed. I fired again, aiming to stop, not kill. The shot hit the floor near his feet. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The man bolted, sprinting toward another exit. I gave chase, adrenaline fueling my legs. I could hear the uneven thump of his boots, the scrape of the knife against the concrete. The warehouse was a maze, but I knew it well enough. I cornered him near a collapsed wall, and for a moment, everything froze. He stopped, breathing hard, knife ready. I trained my flashlight on him, weapon drawn, and issued my command again. The weight of the night, the fear, the adrenaline. It all hung in that frozen second. Then he did something I didn't expect. He dropped the knife. Slowly, deliberately, without a word. I cuffed him quickly, keeping my eyes on him the entire time. Backup finally arrived, and we cleared the warehouse together. In total, we found 3 victims, all bound, bruised, but alive. The man had been holding them for hours, moving silently, using the darkness and maze-like stacks to stay hidden. He had broken in to target them specifically, but why, we didn't know immediately. Later, investigators discovered he was part of a small group involved in ransom and abduction schemes. Driving back to the precinct, the adrenaline finally started to fade. My hands were still shaking, but there was relief, raw, deep relief that everyone had survived. I kept replaying the scene in my head. The smell, the darkness, the dragging marks, the shadows moving in that empty warehouse. I realized that it wasn't luck that had saved the victims or me. It was training, observation, and staying calm when everything inside screamed to panic. By the time I parked at the precinct, the first light of dawn was creeping over the city. The warehouse looked like just another abandoned building in the daylight, harmless and quiet. But I knew better. I knew what had happened inside those walls. And I knew that every night out there could bring something just as real, just as terrifying. That night reminded me why I became a cop. Not for the badge, not for the paycheck, but because someone had to stand between ordinary people and the danger they couldn't see coming. And it reminded me that sometimes the scariest moments aren't made up. They're just reality, waiting for the wrong person to show up at the wrong time. I had just finished a double shift, the kind where every muscle aches and your mind feels like it's made of lead. But the call came through anyway. It was around 11:30 at night, and I was parked at the edge of a quiet neighborhood, the streetlights throwing pools of yellow light onto cracked sidewalks. Dispatch sounded almost casual, but something about it made my stomach twist. Reports of a man barricaded inside a residential home on 7th Street, possibly armed, possibly holding someone inside. The words possibly armed always make a cop's instincts kick in, no matter how tired you are. I arrived at the house in under 5 minutes, lights off, siren muted. From the outside, it looked normal enough. A small 2-story brick house with a weathered porch and peeling paint. But the mailbox was knocked over, the front door slightly ajar, and there were scuff marks on the steps. That alone told me something bad had happened here already. I grabbed my flashlight and my sidearm, and I moved slowly toward the door. The air smelled wrong. Smoke mixed with a faint metallic tang. My flashlight swept across the yard and the porch. The door creaked as I pushed it open, the sound loud in the quiet night. Inside, the living room was a mess. Furniture was overturned. Glass from broken picture frames littered the floor, and a small trail of what looked like blood led toward the kitchen. I moved in, keeping my weight low, scanning every shadow. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. The footprints led through the kitchen, down a narrow hallway lined with family photos. One of the frames had been smashed, the glass shattered, and the photos inside smeared. That's when I saw the first victim. A woman, bound and gagged, hiding behind a door. Relief hit me, but only for a second, because I could see the fear in her eyes. She hadn't seen me yet, and she froze when I shone the flashlight toward her. I signaled for her to stay calm, careful not to make any sudden movements. Her hands were tied tightly, and bruises ran down her arms. She was shaking, her breathing ragged. I could see that she had been struggling, but whoever had done this was methodical. The trail of broken furniture, the position of the bindings, and the calm chaos of the scene told me this wasn't a random burglary. The hallway ended in a staircase leading upstairs. I moved cautiously, every sense on high alert. The air up here was heavier, warmer, and smelled of sweat and fear. The man was somewhere in the house. I could feel it in my gut. I reached the top and scanned the hallway. Doors were closed, some slightly ajar. I noticed a bedroom at the end with the door completely closed, and through the small crack, I could see a shadow move. I radioed dispatch, low and urgent. Unit 5, upstairs. Possible suspect barricaded in a bedroom. Multiple victims confirmed. Requesting immediate backup. The radio was faint, full of static and overlapping chatter, but I could hear them say someone was on their way. I didn't have time to wait. I moved slowly toward the bedroom door, flashlight trained on the crack. The shadow shifted again, and I realized the man was pacing inside, holding a large knife. The way he moved was deliberate, like he was aware of the layout of the room and knew exactly how to corner anyone who tried to enter. I thought about the first victim downstairs. I had to be fast. I kicked the door open with a controlled force, flashlight and gun aimed ahead. The man lunged immediately, and instinct took over. I fired once, the shot ringing sharply in the small room, the bullet grazing the wall behind him. He yelped, staggered back, and I pressed forward, shouting commands. He was tall, thin, and his eyes were wild, darting from me to the window behind him. I backed him slowly toward the open window, trying to keep control of the situation. That's when I noticed the second victim. A man crouched in the corner, bound and bruised. He had been hiding, terrified. I moved quickly, pulling him away from danger, checking his bindings enough to keep him safe. The suspect tried to recover, lunging again, but I managed to subdue him with the help of a couple of backup officers who arrived just then. Once he was cuffed and removed from the house, I took a deep breath and looked around. The scene was worse than I expected. In the downstairs rooms, there were signs of struggle in nearly every room. Broken furniture, blood smears on the walls, objects thrown across floors. The victims were shaken, exhausted, and scared, but alive. Later reports confirmed that the suspect had been planning to rob the house, but he had targeted the occupants specifically because of a previous confrontation with the male victim. It wasn't random, he had a motive, but the level of violence showed he wasn't thinking rationally. The investigation revealed more over the next few days. Forensic teams found fingerprints on every surface, evidence of forced entry, and items that the suspect had brought in to restrain and intimidate the victims. He had been watching the house for days, waiting for the right moment. The victims' statements made it clear that the experience had been terrifying, and it could have ended much worse without immediate police response. That night stayed with me for weeks. I couldn't shake the smell of smoke and blood, the feel of the tight knots on the victim's wrists, or the way the suspect's eyes had moved. Calculated, cold, but fearful at the moment he realized he wasn't in control. I kept replaying the chase up the stairs, the moment I kicked down the bedroom door, and the relief when I saw the second victim alive. The house was eventually repaired. The victims were supported through counseling, and the suspect faced serious charges. But for me, the memory wasn't about the paperwork or the arrest. It was about the sharp edge of danger that can appear in a quiet neighborhood at night. It was about the training that allows you to react without panicking, the instincts that make split-second decisions, and the responsibility of knowing that lives are in your hands. Driving home in the early hours, I kept thinking about how quickly everything could have gone wrong. A second delay, a misstep, a different turn of events, and the outcomes would have been tragic. I realized that being a police officer isn't about heroics. It's about awareness, preparation, and the resolve to face real danger without flinching. That night had tested all of that. By the time the sun began to rise, the streets were quiet again, the neighborhood returning to its ordinary, sleepy state. But for me, nothing would ever feel ordinary after that night. I had seen how fragile safety can be, how quickly a house can turn into a trap, and how much courage it takes to walk into a scene that feels like it's waiting to consume you. And even though the case was closed, I knew that the memory of the night, the fear, the tension, the adrenaline, would stay with me forever, a reminder of the reality of the job and the stakes we face every time we put on the badge. I had been on patrol for nearly 12 hours when the call came in. It was a late October night, the air cold and damp, with fog creeping low over the streets. The city had settled into that uneasy quiet that comes just after midnight, where everything seems still but somehow heavier. The dispatcher's voice broke through the static. Unit 14, possible hostage situation at 42 Willow Lane. Neighbor reports shouting, furniture thrown, suspect may be armed. My stomach sank. Hostage calls were never simple. They were dangerous, unpredictable, and often ended badly if you made even the smallest mistake. I arrived at the scene in less than 5 minutes. The street was narrow, lined with old oak trees whose twisted branches scratched the asphalt in the wind. The house in question was a 2-story colonial, worn by time, paint peeling, lawn unkempt. The front porch light flickered faintly, casting long, shifting shadows across the broken screen door. I killed the cruiser's engine and sat for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness. Something about the scene immediately felt wrong. Not just the obvious signs of a struggle, but the silence that followed the initial reports. There were no sirens, no screams, only that low, heavy quiet that makes you notice every small sound. I grabbed my flashlight and my sidearm, stepping out into the cold. The gravel crunch under my boots seemed loud in the quiet. As I approached the front door, I noticed scuff marks on the steps and scratches along the doorframe. Whoever had been inside wasn't subtle. My hand hovered over my weapon as I pushed the door open slowly. The smell hit me instantly. Sweat, blood, and something acrid, like burnt plastic. The living room was a mess. Overturned chairs, shattered lampshades, and a coffee table split in two. Footprints in what looked like dried blood led toward the kitchen. I moved carefully, flashlight sweeping across every surface. The hallway leading to the kitchen was narrow, lined with family photos that had been smashed or thrown to the floor. One of the frames had shattered completely, glass covering the carpet. As I stepped over the debris, I saw it. A woman crouched behind the kitchen island, bound and gagged, her eyes wide with fear. Relief and tension hit me at the same time. She hadn't seen me yet. Her breathing was shallow, shaky. Whoever had done this had been methodical, prepared, and cruel. I gestured for her to stay calm and moved forward, scanning the rest of the kitchen. There was another trail leading to the back door, muddy footprints smeared along the tile. The air was heavier here, sticky with the smell of fear and sweat. My pulse quickened. This wasn't a random break-in. It was targeted, and whoever had done it knew the layout of the house. The back door had been forced open, swinging on broken hinges. Beyond it was a small fenced backyard, dimly lit by a single security light. I moved cautiously, keeping low. The footprints continued across the yard toward a detached garage at the edge of the property. My hand stayed on my weapon. The garage door was partially open, and through the gap, I could see a shadow move. I radioed dispatch, voice low but urgent. Unit 14 on scene. Suspect possibly armed in detached garage. Multiple victims confirmed inside the main house. Requesting immediate backup. There was static, a few overlapping voices, and then confirmation that units were on their way. I didn't wait. Every second counted. I approached the garage slowly, flashlight in my left hand, gun in my right. The air smelled worse here, oil, rust, and something metallic like iron. The shadow moved again, and I could make out the outline of a man crouched, his face hidden by a hood, holding a crowbar. I stepped into the garage, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The man didn't make a sound, didn't react immediately. He just stared. For a split second, everything froze. The smell, the darkness, the quiet hum of the house beyond. Then instinct kicked in. He swung the crowbar and I fired. The bullet hit the wall just above his head. He yelped, stumbled back, and I advanced, shouting commands. The garage was cluttered, tools and boxes stacked haphazardly. I could see another person, male, bound, bruised, hiding behind a stack of crates. My adrenaline spiked as I moved toward him, freeing him carefully while keeping my attention on the suspect. The man lunged again, desperate, but I managed to subdue him, pressing him against the garage wall until backup arrived. By the time additional units had secured the scene, the house had been thoroughly checked. 2 victims were found alive but shaken and injured. They had been restrained for hours, forced to watch the suspect move through the house, rearranging furniture, and terrorizing them with the threat of violence. The suspect had planned this meticulously. He had surveilled the home for days, noted the family's routines, and brought items to restrain and intimidate them. This wasn't opportunistic. It was deliberate. As forensic teams worked through the scene, I walked slowly through the rooms. The living room had deep gouges in the hardwood from the crowbar, walls scuffed with handprints and fingerprints, and broken picture frames that told a story of terror. The kitchen had splatters of blood where the victims had been forced to the floor. Upstairs, the bedrooms were ransacked, drawers emptied, personal belongings thrown about. Every step I took reminded me how close this had come to turning deadly. The investigation revealed even more over the following days. The suspect had a history of burglary and assault, and his plan had been to abduct the victims, possibly to demand ransom. Evidence collected included fingerprints, fiber samples, and DNA, all of which confirmed his presence. It was chilling to realize how organized he had been, how much he had calculated, and how easily it could have gone wrong. One wrong move, 1 second too late, and the situation could have ended in tragedy. Driving home in the first light of dawn, I replayed every moment. Pushing open the front door, the smell of the house, the bound victims, the shadows moving in the garage. The relief that everyone had survived was immense, but it was tempered by the stark reality of how fragile safety can be. That night had tested every skill I had: observation, patience, judgment, and nerve. I parked at my apartment and sat for a long moment, thinking about the victims and the sheer randomness of danger. The streets outside were quiet, sun just beginning to rise, but the memory of the night stayed vivid. The dark corners of the house, the fear in the victim's eyes, and the controlled panic of facing someone who was willing to hurt anyone to achieve his goal. I realized again why I wore the badge. Not for glory, not for recognition, but because someone has to step into those moments when ordinary people cannot. Weeks later, the case closed. The suspect was in custody, facing multiple charges, and the victims were receiving counseling and support. But for me, the night remained etched in memory. The adrenaline, the danger, the responsibility. The house, once a scene of terror, had returned to silence, ordinary and quiet in the daylight. But I knew the fear, the chaos, and the stakes of that night would stay with me forever. It was a reminder that real danger doesn't announce itself. It creeps in quietly, unseen, and it takes people willing to face it head-on to ensure it doesn't destroy lives.